This short video is very useful if you missed the kickoff or if you want to review and have a summary of what you saw in the kickoff. So the pace of change is accelerating at a pace that we have never witnessed before. And most of the business techniques and habits that we use today or we have today were invented in slow times. But today we live in very fast times, fast and overwhelming times. And so what are the specificities of those fast times? First of all, you have way more opportunities or threats than before. The tasks are less delimited. If we made a brochure in the past, we knew when it started and when it finished. When you make a website today, you can always improve it, and that's for many projects. Then you get requests from way more channels than before and an explosion of demands from everyone. The work time is less delimited, especially since COVID. We have this 24/7 connection. And many people have lost their structure between work and their private life. And then because everything is interconnected, in the past, you could move a project forward within your department. But now often all the jobs are interconnected, making them way more complex than before because you need a lot more alignment than before. And what is the consequence? Well, a boost in opportunities and threats means more work. Less delimited tasks, more work. Many more requests, more work. 24/7 connection, more work. And an increased complexity of jobs, more work. And so worldwide we see an explosion of the workload. And it has simply become impossible to deliver everything. And then on the other hand, just like Pavlov conditioned his dogs, you have been conditioned in school and in your early career. When you deliver every request, when you relax only when work is finished, if you control everything, if you don't make any mistakes, if you're rational and strong, if you work hard, if you manage your time, then you're worthy. And you got rewarded with good grades. But if you don't do all these things, you're worthless and you get punished with bad grades. And so you have been conditioned like this for years and years, and some of you even decades. And what does that mean? Is that most of you have unconsciously linked your core identity to delivering everything, to working hard, to being perfect, being rational, strong, and controlling everything. And it means that when you don't do these things, you feel guilty, you feel stressed, you feel uncomfortable, you feel like you're not good enough. And that is only because you have been conditioned. And that conditioning was very useful in slow times, but is not at all useful anymore for today's fast times, where doing these things won't lead to success, impact, and definitely not a great balance. And so what's the result? You find yourself in a catch-22, where on one hand the workload has exploded and is impossible to deliver, and on the other hand you feel worthless if you don't deliver everything, or if you pause while work isn't finished. And that leads to people running faster or working harder, but also to burnout numbers, bad mental health, but also to organizations not adapting fast enough, because these conditionings, although they were very useful in school and in slower times, are absolutely standing in the way of you becoming agile as a person, but also as an organization. So what's the solution then? What are the mindset and the habits of fast and busy times if you want to have more impact, meaning, and balance? For that, I'd like to go back to the time when I was the CEO of an organization in the middle of a transformation. Because when I started, I had way too many things to do. I had to do the turnaround and increase profits and revenues. I had to prepare for the digital transformation, And my shareholders, who were private equity, wanted to sell the company immediately and so weren't ready to invest anymore. They wanted to see an increase in profit immediately. So I was faced with this huge challenge with everyone in the organization being overworked already. So what could I do? And the only thing I could do was to focus. And that is really the word for overwhelming fast times, is you need to focus. Extremely successful people focus and say no to almost everything. And so I had to focus, and we decided that we would stop 70% of the projects and brands that we were working on, because we applied the Pareto rule and we noticed that these 70% were, yes, driving a little bit of revenues, but were costing us profit. And by stopping those 70% of projects and brands, we immediately freed up a lot of time and increased our profit immediately. And that freed time for 70% of the people within the organization could then be refocused on transforming for the digital time and building new, more profitable and revenue-driven products. But it's not easy to focus, because if I wanted to focus, I first had to know what I wanted. What was my intention? What did I want for myself? What did I want for the company? Because it's only once you know what you want that you know what to say yes to and what to say no to. If you don't know what you want, everything becomes a priority and there is no focus. And then once I knew what I wanted and knew what I wanted to focus on, it was time for me to say no to these 70% of brands, to authors for whom the projects were their baby, for employees who had worked months or years on some projects that we decided we were going to stop. So you can imagine that a lot of people were disappointed. Customers, authors, employees, shareholders who were having doubts and wanted to see an improvement way more rapidly than what I was promising them. So I had to say no a lot, but that's not how I was programmed. So when I felt like I would disappoint someone, when I had somebody angry or crying in front of me and I thought, I still have to say no, my conditioning kicked in. So I felt stressed, I felt guilty, I felt not professional. And of course you say no to all these things, but you don't know yet if it will really be successful. So it was way easier for me to say yes and to stay in my old conditioning and not disappoint people and feel more like, okay, I'm delivering something. And that's when I noticed that I really had to manage my energy. It was only when I managed my energy that I felt able to go against my conditioning and say no. That I felt able to handle all these challenges, all the chaos that came from stopping so many projects. And also the chaos from not knowing what was coming in the place yet. But for that, I had to be aware of my mindset and to build a growth mindset. Because if I wasn't aware that I was about to say yes to the next project, I couldn't be at choice and change it. If I wasn't aware that my stress was standing in the way of me sticking to the strategy that we had, I couldn't change it. So building this awareness of my thoughts, of my emotions, of my sensations that would trigger my old conditionings that weren't serving me anymore was crucial. And for that, building awareness, managing my energy, knowing what I wanted and to focus, I had to regularly slow down and pause. Every time I didn't feel like I had the energy I needed, I had to stop and build my energy. Every time I felt like we were way too busy, overwhelmed, I had to stop and look at the priorities. Every time we faced huge issues, I had to stop and look at the root causes. Every time we needed a creative idea, I had to stop because the rational brain is preventing you from getting ideas. The creative brain only works when the rational brain stops. And that's how I got into slowly effortless work instead of hard work with little impact, like it's represented on this image. So the habits of slow times, which are delivering everything, being action-oriented. When you see an opportunity or a threat, you immediately do something about it. Managing my time, being ego-driven, strong and rational, and working hard were only leading to hard work for little impact. I had to reprogram myself and to focus instead of delivering everything, to act with purpose instead of simply do everything that came on my plate, to manage my energy and fears before managing my time, to be mindset driven and build this emotional intelligence also, and be conscious of my thoughts, of my sensations that were preventing me from doing what I really wanted and what would lead to my success, instead of simply be strong, ego-driven and rational. And then I had to regularly pause and slow down instead of simply working hard. And that's how I got into effortless work for a bigger impact. And those are the habits that you will learn in this course. And it's not that those habits of slow times are not useful anymore. You will still need, once you decide what to focus on, to deliver it. Once you know what you want, to be action-oriented. Once you have managed your energy and fears, to manage your time. Once you are conscious of what you want to do, of your emotions, act rationally. And once you have paused and you know what you want, and it's clear how to solve your issues, and you have this creative idea, to work hard again. It's just that in the past it was sufficient to do this. Today you also have to learn to do this before doing that. And so pausing and slowing down helped me change my habits. And with those habits, I got into this effortless work with big impact, meaning, and balance. Because I started to change, my leadership team started to change. Because the best way to change others is to change yourself. Once my leadership team started changing, the whole organization and the culture shifted. Because culture is the sum of the habits of an organization. And you as a leader or you as an employee, you are part of the sum of those habits. So you all have to change your habits, and then the culture will shift. With that new culture, we could implement a new business techniques like working agile in cross-functional teams, build empowerment. And that's how we became performant and agile and reached great results. And I'm talking about double-digit profit growth, 0 burnouts, and 50% less absenteeism. So you will get in a phase where you feel better because your impact increases, your balance gets better, you feel more meaningful, but also those habits are exactly the habits that your organization needs to become more agile, to really be able to implement those great strategies that you see for yourself. And so it's a win-win. So this is what you will learn in the course. So we start with the module Slow Down and Act with Purpose, where you'll build these two habits. Then you shift into mindset. That's the most important module of the course, where you will build this emotional intelligence and be mindset driven before being action driven. Then you'll build this energy, because resilience in a fast changing, overwhelming world is very important. And only when you have built these habits, then you will be able to focus and say no to all these things you have to say no to. Because of course this is the most important habit, but you will only be able to focus once you regularly slow down and pause, are aware of your thoughts, emotions, sensations, have high energy, know what you want, and that's when you will be able to focus and say no. And that is what leading authentically in digital times is all about. So have fun, and we'll see each other in the modules.